All right, so I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a professional, but as someone who's spent a lot of time talking to different professionals and studying and going over software and things like that, I do have quite a bit of knowledge in the area of financial planning. But there again, I'm not a professional. Can the worst case scenario happen to you? Yeah, it can. What's the number one thing that people are scared of? They're scared of outliving their money in retirement. So you need to put a lot of thought into this, but you also need to go in with your eyes wide open. So here are a few things I think that could be robbing you of your retirement plan if you haven't gotten over that hump yet and got a real retirement plan built for you yet. And the number one is the 4% rule. The 4% rule was generated by Bill Bengen, and it was actually it's a great rule of thumb, and that's exactly what it is, a rule of thumb. And basically it states that if you draw 4% of your nest egg out per year and add for inflation over 30 years, that you shouldn't run out of money. And it's a very conservative number, and it has over the years been kind of the golden rule of thumb for retirement. But what it doesn't take into account is that your spending in retirement goes in a smile. And it goes, your go-go years, you start out spending quite a bit more, and then in your slow-go years, your spending actually slows down. And then in your later years, it goes back up because of healthcare costs. So, you can afford to spend a little bit more in your go-go years and then kind of make up for it in your slow-go years in most cases. Now, again, if you don't have a retirement plan, if you don't have a customized retirement plan built for you, you can't just kind of stick your thumb up and say, well, I think it's going to be this or I think it's going to be that. Because if you wait on the 4% rule, it might tell you, that you need $3-4 million, because $1 million is about $40,000 a year in the 4% rule, or $500,000 would be about $20,000 a year. Pretty tough to live on $20,000 a year plus your Social Security. And a lot of us want to retire like I did before we get our Social Security. So obviously I'm spending more than 4% for the first few years, and then once I start drawing my Social Security, I'll be spending more like 2 to 3%. So it should work out pretty good in my plan, but just to kind of, stick your thumb up and say, well, it should be about this or that, doesn't work too well. And there's a lot of good software out there. Boldin, Boldin, has a software that's free. There is a free version of that software, or you can get a paid version which does quite a bit more for about $120 a year. And I actually used it as a double check to the financial advisors that I used as well. And I've done other videos where I actually interviewed 3 financial advisors and had 2 plans built. One was paid for by my company, and the other I paid for, which was, about $1,000. So getting those plans done can bring a lot to your peace of mind. And just because you have financial advisors doesn't mean you have to give them your nest egg and they have to do your investing. Although they can, they don't have to. They will do things just for a fee. They're called fee-only financial advisors. And you want to go ahead and get a fiduciary and ask them if they're a fiduciary. If they're obligated to make the best choices in your best interest. So I'd like to pause the video for just a minute and ask you to reach down and hit one of those comments. And hey, let me know where you're from. Let me know what stage of retirement planning that you're in right now. Maybe you're already retired. Anyway, it would help YouTube's algorithm to let this video reach out to other people. So let's go ahead and get back to the video. Okay, and also kind of based on the 4% rule is a misconception that you are going to run out of money all at once. And generally what happens in these worst case scenarios, there's what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. And what it is, it basically runs 1,000 different models of how things can affect your retirement and how the different markets can affect it and all these different things that can happen. And it runs these 1,000 simulations, and it gives you a probability number or a percentage that you'll have that amount of money that you want to spend all the way through how many every years that you plot out. And from what I've seen of these Monte Carlo simulations, because like I say, I went ahead and paid for a version of that Bolden software, and it's got a lot of levers you can pull and knobs you can turn, to make things. And what I saw is basically, you're not going to really run out of money, but you're going to have to slow down on your spending. And that's where you can put some guardrails up, towards the end of your retirement and say, I got to hunker down here and, just spend this much. And I know nobody really wants to hear that, but hey, if you go back and you look at the stock market and break it up into like 30-year increments, which is kind of a retirement, you are more likely to have more money than you did if you use the 4% rule. You're going to have more money than you started out with. If you started out with, say, $500,000, 30 years from now, you should have more than $500,000 if you stick to the 4% rule, which kind of tells you that, hey, you may be able to spend a little bit more than what you're thinking you will. But again, you're the one who's got to sleep at night. So if that probability is, say, 80%, and you say, I just can't live with that, there's a 20% chance that I could run out of money, you know what? That's your personal decision. And you are more than welcome to, do what you need to do to work longer or spend less, get your income down or get your spending down, things like that, to make it work so it's up there in the 90 to 95%. Now, I have pulled enough levers and knobs that it will never give you 100%. It's really weird, but it won't do it. Anyway, is 80% or 90% close enough for you that you think you can sleep at night and that you'll be adaptable and you'll be able to make those adjustments later on in your retirement to make sure that you don't run out of money? So the third thing I'd like to talk about today is, what's the bigger risk? Is the bigger risk that you'll run out of money in retirement, or is the bigger risk that you'll run out of health in retirement? Let's face it, when you retire, let's say you retire at 60 years old, you only have about 15 or 20 years of good, healthy life that you can expect. And, expect is a big word, because I'm going to tell you, I retired at 61 and I have a very skewed version of this now, because 6 months into retirement, I had a brain injury. I suffered a subdural hematoma, and it almost took my life. And it could have left me crippled. It could have left me with very much a deficit of being able to talk, being able to walk, do all those sorts of things. And for 3 to 4 months, I was in really bad shape. And I was like an infant at some points. I was having trouble talking. I would think that I was chewing my food and my mouth wasn't moving. I mean, motor skills just weren't there. And it was really, really scary. It was very scary for me, and it was very scary for my wife. And when we came home from the hospital, I actually fell twice, and we had to rush back and get CT scans done to make sure that I didn't re-injure myself. So it was a very bad part of my life. And I'm going to tell you right now, had I not had the great doctors that I had who took care of me, and my physical therapist, my occupational therapist, and my speech therapist, who all got me back to the point where my mind was working right again, I don't know where I'd be, and I don't know how much I would enjoy my retirement. So my first year of retirement was pretty rough. The first 6 months was great, but then I had about 4 months that I was recovering from all this. So all that said, what I'm getting at is, if you get a Monte Carlo simulation run and it says you're 80% there, well, how much is getting up to 90% or 95% worth to you? Because for most people, what my financial advisors have told me is that it's about 3 to 5 years to gain that 10% from 80 to 90%, and then about another 3 or 3 to 5 to get up to that 95%. So is it worth 3 to 5 years for that extra 10%? Or would you go ahead and make the plan to reduce your spending, or to go ahead and, get some part-time work, or what they call a bridge retirement, start a YouTube channel, do some woodworking, things like that. So hey, I hope this video's helped you out, and if it has, reach down and hit that like button and watch this video next.